Okay, hello everybody. Um, I thought last night's class went well, at least from this end. If anybody has any questions, or if you couldn't hear anything, or if you couldn't see anything, please feel free to message me or email me, or we can talk. Okay, we're going to get better, I promise. I also found out today, as you probably all did too, that Penn State has extended the remote learning through the end of the semester. So um, we'll get good at this by the time we're done. Okay, and I'll work with you guys. Okay, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about solving equations by factoring. And all the equations we're going to talk about tonight are going to be linear equations, are going to be quadratic equations. So any equation that can be written in the form ax squared, that's the key. It's got the x squared plus bx plus c is called a quadratic equation. So I want to get my pen, and that's way too thick. Quadratic equation. And the key here is also that a cannot be equal to 0. That's just a mathy thing. That a can't be 0 because 0 times anything would be 0, and that whole x squared would go away. And that's the important part. Okay, so all these are going to have x squareds in them. All right. Examples would be 3x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Now that 0 usually will start off as a y, but then we're just going to change it to 0 immediately. So that's always going to be a 0. So everything on one side, 0 on the other. Another example, x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. The equations you're used to seeing look like this. Y equals 3x plus 4. Those are linear equations. That's what you did in Algebra 1. It has an x to the first power. These are quadratic equations. They have as an x squared. That's the key. Okay, to do this, we're going to use something called the zero product property. And what the zero product property says is that for any two numbers, so if you have a number and I have a number, let's call them A and B. If we multiply A times B and the answer is 0, what does that mean is true about one or both of those numbers? So hopefully right now you're thinking, what that means, Mr. P, is either A is equal to 0 or B is equal to 0. Or both are equal to 0, but that would be kind of boring because 0 times 0 equals 0 is what we call a trivial equation. So what this means is either A is 0 or B is 0. So right here I've got one. It's already factored for you. I didn't even make you factor it. So if x minus 2 times x plus 1 is equal to 0, that means that either x minus 2 is equal to 0 or x plus 1 is equal to 0. Okay, and treat them individually here. That's an or. If x minus 2 equals 0, add 2, that means x equals 2. Over here, I'm going to subtract 1, that means x equals negative 1. So there are my two answers. Usually we'll have at least two answers, maybe more sometimes. 2 and negative 1. Okay, so here's one where you are going to have to factor it. Okay, so there's no GCF, so I'm going to put two sets of parentheses down here. So that means, let's see here, so that we can do my little trick here. I need factors of negative 24 that add up to be negative 2. Factors of negative 24 that add up to be negative 2, that would be something like negative 6 and positive 4. Negative 6 times positive 4 is negative 24, and negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. So that means I'm going to have x minus 6 and x plus 4. Okay, if x minus 6 times x plus 4 equals 0, that means x minus 6 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0, which means x equals 6, or x equals negative 4. Okay, here's one, no GCF. So I need factors of 6 that add up to be 5. That would be 3 and 2. So I'm going to have x plus 3 and x plus 2 equals 0. So that means x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. So that means that x equals negative 3, or x equals negative 2. So after a while, I stopped showing all this little individual work, but what I did there is I just subtracted 3 from both sides. I subtracted 2 from both sides here. Here are my two answers. Okay, so if I'm going too fast, all I can say is maybe just go back and watch it again later, okay? But I only have 15 minutes on these videos. I want to make sure I get everything covered. Okay, so now here, I know I have a GCF of x, so that's going to leave me with an x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. So that x just chills out there. Now I need factors of 6 that add up to be negative 5. Positive 6 add up to be negative 5. So I know they have to both be negative, because negative times negative will give me positive, but then it still allows me to get that negative in the middle. So it's going to be negative 3 and negative 2. So that's going to be 3 there and 2 there. So we're just going to have an extra answer here. We're going to have 3 answers instead of just 2. So if x times x minus 3 times x minus 2 equals 0, that means that either x is equal to 0, that's one of my answers, x minus 3 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. Okay, if x minus 3 is equal to 0, that means x equals 3. If x minus 2 equals 0, that means x equals 2. 0, 3, and 2. Okay, and down here, I'm going to have one that we can't use that rule because of this 3 out in front. That rule where we make the x, I can't do that here because of that 3 out front. Okay, so there's no GCF. So I'm going to put this is the one, by the way, that I made a mistake on. So that's why I'm redoing the video. So I know I'm going to have a 3y there and a y there. And my choices for here and here are 4 times 1 or 2 times 2. And I know they have to be different signs. So I'm just going to put a plus minus in there, and I'll fix that in a second if I have to. So I'm going to try the 2 and the 2. And all you got to do is check the outside, which gives you negative 6y, and the inside, which gives you 2y. And they are supposed to add up to be 11y, which they don't. So I'm going to scrap that. I'm going to erase that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that. And after doing a little mental math, I think if I put a 4 here and a 1 there, the outside will give me negative 12y, and the inside gives me positive 1y. Well, that gives me a negative 11y. I needed a positive 11y. So whenever that happens, you got the right number, but the wrong sign. Just switch your signs. Okay, so I'm going to get my eraser, and I'm going to get rid of that, get rid of that, and I'm going to put a minus there and a plus there. So now the outside gives me a positive 12y, and the inside gives me a negative 1y. That gives me my 11y. Okay, so I'm just going to do the same thing I did last time. My answers are going to be 3y minus 1 equals 0, or y plus 4 equals 0. Okay, do the easy one first. This one gives me y equals negative 4. Over here, I need to add 1 to both sides. So 3y equals 1 divided by 3 divided by 3. Y equals 1/3. 1/3 and negative 4. Yep. Okay. So here, let's change colors for a little, change pace. Okay, so here I need to factor out a 10. So that's going to give me 6x squared minus 13x plus 6 equals 0. So that 10 just chills out here. 2 sets of parentheses. I can't use that rule, right, because of that 6 out front. So I have to just guess and check. So my choices are 6 times 1 or 3 times 2. That's for the 6x squared. I'm going to try 3x and 2x. And I know my signs are going to be both negative, because a negative times a negative will give me a positive, but it'll still allow me to pick up that negative in the middle. And my choices for this 6 are also 6 times 1 and 3 times 2. So I'm going to put the 2 here and the 3 there. Let's check it. Outside gives me negative 9x. Inside gives me negative 4x. That gives me my negative 13x. Good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to do this real quick. Erase these so I have a little bit of room to work there. Okay, so that means that either 10 is equal to 0, which obviously is not. 3x minus 2 is equal to 0, or 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. For this one, if I add 2, so 3x equals 2 divided by 3 divided by 3, x equals 2/3. Here's one of my answers. Here I'm going to add 3, so 2x equals 3 divided by 2 divided by 2, x equals 3/2. Yep, okay, so I've got about 4 minutes left. Apologize if it seems like I'm going fast, but I want to make sure. I got 2 more examples. Okay, this is one, we actually did this problem last night, but we did it without the equation part. We just did the factoring. But 4 terms, factor by grouping. So in this group, I'm going to factor out an x squared. That goes me with x plus 5. This one, I'm going to factor out a negative 4, and that gives me an x plus 5 equals 0. These two are always the same, so I'm going to factor out an x plus 5. So this went away and this went away. So what's left over is x squared minus 4. Okay, the x plus 5 is not factorable, but the x squared minus 4 is a difference of squares. So that gives me an x plus 2 and x minus 2. So that means x equals negative 5, x equals negative 2, or x equals positive 2. Okay, and then the last one down here, this one looks totally different than all the others. It's just because it's all not arranged right. So I need to just do a little bit of rearranging. So I'm going to distribute this x. So that's going to give me x squared plus 2x equals 8. And like I said at the very beginning, I want everything to be on the same side. So I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. So x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. So now we're back to when we can use this rule. I've got factors of negative 8 that add up to be 2, and that would be 4 and negative 2. So when I do my parentheses, I've got x plus 4 and x minus 2. So that means that x equals negative 4 and x equals 2. Okay, so I know I did that pretty fast. There's quite a few in the homework that are like this one where you have to rearrange. You have to get everything on one side. You might have to do some distributing, and then 0 on the other side. But then factoring is all the same. So I'll post this out there, and you guys can send me emails. We can set up separate meetings. Like I said before, I've got all day. I don't have anything going on. I'm working in the yard and going on hikes and just taking care of stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me and we can set up a meeting and talk. Okay? You guys have a great night. Stay safe and stay well.